Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to our live broadcast. I'm Amanda Nichols with Our Revolution, and I'm here to kick off this very special call to Bust Big Tech. If you're here in Zoom, let us know your name and where you're from in the chat. Also, you can help us build this call by sharing the link on your own Facebook and Twitter. There's power in numbers, especially when it comes to taking on monopoly power, which is what we're doing here tonight. The links to share this broadcast are getting dropped in the chat right now. I'd like to say welcome to Amanda out in Washington. We've got Aaron in DC. Oh, we've got Catherine Schutzius in Chicago, Danielle from Florida, Luke in Silver Spring, Maryland, David Legrand in Howard County, Maryland, and Waleed from Detroit. So, Sacramento, San Diego, we've got folks tuning in from across the country. Really glad to see it. For those of you who might be watching this live on social media, we're dropping in our link in those streams right now for you to jump over to Zoom for a more interactive experience. And if you're calling in by phone, that link is ourrev.us/Zoom. Thank you so much to switching over. We want as many people in the Zoom room as possible tonight. And for those who are already with us here in Zoom, please keep telling us your name, tell us where you're from in the chat. Right now I'm seeing someone says, Stephen Carrillo says, greetings from Albany, California. We've got Jesse and Carol in Prince George's County, Maryland. Another David Wilcox from Florida. Joe Kirchner from Silver Spring, Maryland. A lot of Maryland representing tonight. Leah Herzberg from Encino, California. And Pete in PA. All right. So welcome. Thank you guys all for being with us. Again, my name is Amanda Nichols, and we have a great lineup tonight. We've got folks from right at the heart of the anti-monopoly fight, which is really about the corporate takeover of our democracy. In just a bit, we'll be talking with U.S. Representative David Cicilline of Rhode Island. We'll talk to antitrust pioneer Barry Lynn of the Open Markets Institute, and Evan Greer from Fight for the Future, part of our coalition. This campaign we've launched not just with Fight for the Future, but also Economic Security Project, Athena, and Demand Progress to pass two key bills to bust big tech's monopoly power. Representative Cicilline really led this fight in the House, and now the action is in the Senate. So we're mobilizing folks tonight to call your senators and tell them to take up these bills right now. Those bills are the Open Apps Markets Act and the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. These would limit self-dealing and create competition, and they would empower citizens with more choice on these platforms. The link to make these calls to your senators is getting dropped in the chat right now. It'll take you to a page that helps you make easy calls. Tell your senators, please pass the bills that we're discussing on tonight's call. That's ourrev.us/breakuptech. All right. Thank you guys for all being here tonight and getting involved like this. Remember, our revolution is powered entirely by the grassroots. So if you can help support this campaign, you can help support the rest of our work by becoming a sustaining member of our revolution. Please take a moment right now while the call is building to sign up at the link that's being dropped in the chat right now. That's ourrev.us/2022 member. At higher membership levels, you'll get stickers, posters, tote bags, t-shirts, just as a token of our thanks. And for those on the phone, just go ahead and press *3 and an operator will help you quickly sign up as a member. Okay, we're counting down to 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and there are thousands of people on the phones right now. This is a great time to hop over to Zoom, where you can plug into the Q&A and interact with our folks directly in the chat. That's ourrev.us/Zoom. In the Zoom, we love to see your comments. We want this to be really participatory, and I was going to thank everybody for taking the time to join us tonight to do some organizing around this important issue. And real quick, we've got Bruce Neff from Canfield, Ohio. We've got Kat from Montgomery County, Maryland. All kinds of folks. Quentin from Grand Forks, North Dakota. Really good to see all you guys here. And it is 8:30 p.m. So let's get started. What an exciting night, actually. This call is going to be a lot of fun, very interesting. My name is Amanda Nichols, here with Our Revolution, and I'll be joined tonight by my co-host, Alex Harmon from the Economic Security Project. So, across the economy, power and market share are being consolidated into the hands of just a few big players. As a result, competition has dwindled, new business creation has plunged, and workers' wages have stagnated. Concentrated wealth, which translates into concentrated political power, is a fundamental threat to our democracy. That's why fighting corporate monopolies consistently ranks as a top issue for our grassroots membership. And Our Revolution is committed to providing effective organizing opportunities for our members to help break up concentrated corporate power. Right now, we have the chance to actually pass some legislation, which is a rare opportunity in the midterm election year. These two bills are the Open Apps Markets Act and the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. These would limit self-dealing and enable fair competition on big tech platforms and app markets, and it would improve fairness for small businesses while empowering citizens with more choice on the platforms. Most of all, it's a strike against monopoly power, which is critical, and these measures have broad support. The action right now is in the Senate, and we need to make sure that our senators hear from all of us, their constituents, to push these bills through. We're dropping the link in the chat right now for you to take a minute and call your senators, leave a message on their voicemail, tell them that you want them to pass these two bills. That link is ourrev.us/breakuptech. And now with that, I will read a couple more things here. We've got Susan Goodman in Coral Springs, Florida. We have Jenny. Oh my gosh. We've got Bill Conrad from Cincinnati, Ohio. All kinds of folks calling to bust big tech in the chat. Chuck from Fredericksburg, Virginia is in the house, he said. Henry is in Minnesota, near Minneapolis. And we've got Sierra from Maui. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Let's kick things off. Let me pass it over to Alex Harmon to start bringing in our guests. Alex.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, folks. I'm Alex Harmon of the Economic Security Project. And I'm thrilled to be part of this coalition to bust big tech monopoly power. As Amanda mentioned, tonight we'll be hearing from U.S. Representative David Cicilline of Rhode Island. He's the chair of the House Antitrust Subcommittee, who's championed a suite of bills to break up monopoly power. We'll hear from Barry Lynn, Executive Director of the Open Markets Institute, who pioneered understanding of how 21st century monopolies threaten our democracy, liberty, security, and prosperity. And Evan Greer, Director of Fight for the Future, on building this coalition and this groundswell to really affect change in this area. So I work with a small but mighty coalition to support these bills and get them across the finish line. We've been at this since Chairman Cicilline introduced this package last year, and sometimes I have to pinch myself that we've come so far. Some of our closest partners in this effort have agreed to co-sponsor this call tonight, including the Athena Coalition, Demand Progress, and Fight for the Future. Our revolution is doing incredible work, and with your help, we can win in this fight against big tech monopolies. So our first guest is Representative David Cicilline, chair of the House Antitrust Subcommittee, which in 2020 completed an extensive investigation and produced a nearly 500-page report on tech monopolies. Cicilline then introduced a set of 6 bills that would prohibit major tech platforms from prioritizing their own products, prohibit their acquisition of new companies just to squash competition, raise money for antitrust enforcement, and more. Representative Cicilline, welcome to the call. Tell us about the work you've done to get us to this point.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, and thank you to Our Revolution for inviting me to tonight's Organize to Win broadcast. I want to begin really by thanking you, Alex, for your leadership and your advocacy on promoting competition and reining in monopoly power in digital markets. And you've been a really important part of our work, as so many of the others that are on this call. You know, over the past 2 decades, the internet has become the dominant way Americans communicate and access information. It's virtually impossible to participate in our economy or in our democracy if you're not online. At the same time, a handful of platforms have come to dominate many aspects of the digital marketplace. And recognizing these developments, last Congress, I led a top-to-bottom investigation of competition in digital markets, as you mentioned. It was one of the most extensive and in-depth market investigations in the history of the Congress. We investigated the structure of markets like the internet search, e-commerce, social networking, and app stores. We reviewed the business practices of the firms that dominate and often monopolize these markets. We also looked at whether our existing antitrust laws are sufficient to address anti-competitive behavior. The subcommittee found significant evidence showing that today's platform monopolies take advantage of structural weaknesses in the law and insufficient levels of antitrust enforcement. As a result, these firms have been able to expand their dominance across various market segments, often by buying or burying their competitive threats. We found that despite competing in different lines of business, once these firms achieve dominance, they use a similar playbook of anti-competitive conduct to protect and expand their dominance and destroy competition. As a result, consumers have fewer choices, pay higher prices, and have access to lower quality products and services. There's less innovation, less privacy and security, fewer jobs, and less choice in the United States than there would be if we had a competitive marketplace. So in response to these issues, we developed legislation to end the harmful abuses of dominant online platforms. There are two bills in particular that I want to highlight for you this evening. First is the bill I introduced with my colleague Ken Buck called the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. In the Senate, this bill has been sponsored by Senator Klobuchar and Senator Grassley. This legislation prevents the most dominant platforms from abusing their dominance to expand their monopoly power. It stops them from preferencing their own products and services and from using their gatekeeping power to harm competitors. It ensures consumers have choices online and stops these platforms from picking winners and losers. The second bill is the Open Markets Act. In the House, it's sponsored by Congressman Hank Johnson. And in the Senate, it's sponsored by Senator Richard Blumenthal and Marsha Blackburn. This bill would bring more competition to app store markets. As anyone with a smartphone knows, on both iPhone and Android devices, there are not any real choices for how to download apps to your phone. Apple and Google have monopolies in their respective ecosystems, and as a result, we all pay higher prices for apps than we would in a competitive market. Apps are also incentivized to adopt harmful business models where, to escape the exorbitant fees charged by Google and Apple, apps instead collect and monetize massive amounts of user data. The Open Markets Act addresses these problems by giving users more choice for how to download software. You can still use your favorite app store, but you should also be able to choose alternatives. And software developers will not be locked into paying monopoly prices with nowhere else to go. The American Innovation and Choice Online Act has passed out of the Judiciary Committee in both the House and the Senate, and the Open Markets Act has passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee as well. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. These companies these bills that would rein in these companies, and these companies, of course, are the richest companies in the history of the world. They've made profits never seen before. They are spending tens of millions of dollars lobbying against these bills, running misleading ads, and funding astroturf groups. They want to kill these bills to maintain the status quo for as long as they can because it's generating them enormous profits. Despite that, there's a lot of momentum behind both of these bills. They have significant bipartisan support, and they will pass when they are brought to the floor in both chambers in the coming weeks. I just want to say thank you to everyone who is on this call. Thank you again, Alex, because we're at a very critical moment in this fight, and we're about to, be in the big battle with the floor votes, and we wouldn't be in this place without so many people on this call and with all of the advocacy of you and all the organizations that are represented. So this is a critical moment. Thank you. We just have a little more work to do to get over the finish line. And as I said, we're battling the biggest economic powers of our time, but we're going to win this fight. Thank you.
So, Congressman, we have 3,000 people on the call now, and you're actually getting a lot of props for your work on this gunfight, which is the whole other call. But I really appreciate what you've talked about there, and we're asking folks tonight is to reach out and call their senators. I'm on the front lines with you. You're on the front lines talking to talking to other members, talking to staff, and we're seeing all these ads, and they're about to roll out more. Can you just share with us how important it is to do that outreach and to hear from constituents about what they're thinking about these bills?
Yeah, there's nothing more powerful than for members of the United States Senate and members of the House to hear from their constituents, to demand that we rein in big tech and really address the monopoly power of these big platforms. This is central to the survival of our democracy. I mean, the monopoly power of these platforms has brought such harm not only to our economy but to our democracy. And we're battling against these companies that have virtually unlimited resources to spread misinformation, to hire every lobbyist that's not currently engaged to work on their behalf. And so in order to combat that, we don't have the same resources, but we have the American people who strongly support this legislation. But members of the Senate, members of the House need to hear from their constituents of why it matters. That, we all know competition produces, the best, most important innovation happens because of competition. It's the single greatest driver of innovation. And without competition, you don't have innovation. And so this is not good for the economy. It's not good long-term in terms of, the development of new products and services. It's not good for workers. It's not good for consumers because people pay more for things. There's less choice. But people need to hear about that directly from their constituents, why this matters. Because they're hearing from a lot of lobbyists and they're seeing these television ads, which are really distorting what this legislation will do and will not do. And there's nothing more powerful than elected members knowing that their constituents are watching and they expect them to stand with them and workers and consumers and innovators and small businesses and not stand with these big monopolies.
100%. And I think it's kind of amazing that we're at this point where for all their money, for all their armies of lobbyists, we're still at this point we might actually win, and it's knock on wood, but
we're going to win. Well, and it's funny because in many ways they're making our point, because of course one of the big problems with concentrated economic power is it comes with concentrated political power. And so by using all the resources they're using to try to defeat these bills, they're making the point of why it's so dangerous to have this kind of monopoly power in our economy and in our democracy. So if you look at the history of our country, it's been the battle between democracy and concentrated economic power. This is just the most recent form of it, and we need to win this fight.
Absolutely agree. And so again, thank you so much live from your car. Thank you so much for taking.
All right, I'm on my way. Alex, I just want to say, I know you're next going to have on Ro Ukana. I just want to say thank you to Ro. He's been a really important thinker in all of this space and a great supporter of our work. And I'm very grateful for what he, the intellectual heft that he's brought to this and the passion. I just want to say thank you to him.
So unfortunately, Congressman Khanna won't be able to make it tonight, but we are going to be joined by Barry Lynn.
Barry Lynn, who has been central to all of our work, and actually we would not be where we are today without the extraordinary work of Barry Lynn and the support he gave us all throughout the investigation and all throughout the crafting of the legislation. So thank you, Barry.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, Representative.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. We appreciate your leadership on this issue and look forward to continuing working with you to get these bills passed now. And so, folks, we're going to drop the link in the chat again. So that to click that link, you go ahead and click it. You can call your senators. It's very easy. Tell them to pass these two important bills. And the link is ourrev.us/breakuptech. And so, as we just said, we're going to now turn to Barry Lynn. He is the executive director of the Open Markets Institute. Barry is a pioneer in the study of how monopolies of the 21st century threaten our democracy, individual liberties, security, and prosperity. His most recent book, Liberty from All Masters, is a culmination of decades of his work, and he's here with us now to share his expertise. Barry, thanks so much, and good to see you.
Hey, thank you all. It's a great honor to be with you. It's really good to be back with Our Revolution. You guys have a really great organization, really important group. And thank you, Alex. As Chairman Cicilline made clear, you played a hugely important role in this thus far. In the time I have, I just wanted to make sort of 3 quick points. It's really kind of talk about what's at stake here. get into a little bit of the history, how do we get here? And then also sort of talk about our opportunity, which is really to build back radically better. It's not just to knock these guys down, it's to think of a world beyond that. So what's at stake? The simple answer is that everything is at stake. It's like Google, Facebook, and Amazon together, they pose the gravest threat to our democracy, to our most important fundamental liberties, in at least a century, probably since the Civil War here in America. Every ill we face today, wherever we're looking, whether we're looking at jobs and wages, wherever we're looking, a monopolist is part of the problem, or is actually the fundamental source of the problem. Monopolists are the people who are driving down our wages. Monopolists are the people who are driving up the inflation. Monopolists are responsible for all the shortages, such as, baby formula, semiconductors. Monopolists, take away our health care and our drugs. Monopolists are driving up our rent. We're seeing these outrageous rises in rent. Monopolists are radically undermining our national security. The monopoly problem is a fundamental part of what our climate crisis. It's terrifying. But the most immediately dangerous problem, the most immediate dangerous part of our monopoly problem is Google, Facebook, and Amazon, because they control how we talk to one another, how we do business with one another. Not only do these corporations extort us day to day, not only do they steal other people's businesses, but they manipulate us. They manipulate how we think. They enrage us. They censor us. They hide certain things from us, certain ideas, and they force us to embrace other ideas. If we lose control over these platforms, it's over. Let's just be honest about this. Now for a little bit of history. How did we get here? The simple answer is that we forgot how to use our most powerful tool, our most powerful political tool, which is our anti-monopoly laws. For 200 years in this country, it was a really hard bit of work, but liberty, we used our anti-monopoly tools. This goes back to the founding, to build our sense of liberty, our democracy, our community. We used anti-monopoly tools to make the peace, to make us prosperous. This was hard work. It didn't happen overnight. But, what we did is we did this by creating freedom for each individual to take part, to really contribute to the whole, to build what's better, to fix what needs to be fixed. The Constitution, our Constitution is the single most important, powerful anti-monopoly document in human history. And then we followed up with this vast body of law and regulations, which we developed over 200 years to deal with all different concentrations of power, all different technologies. And it worked. It worked. In 1980, 200 years after the revolution, the average farm in the United States was 160 acres, the same as it was 200 years before. The average store was owned by a family, not by a corporation. Services were delivered by families, not corporations. Yes, there were big corporations like IBM and AT&T, but they were counterbalanced by unions. But 40 years ago, Reagan launched a war against our anti-monopoly laws. In place of liberty and democracy, they said, we're going to use these laws to promote efficiency. I mean, their goal was to boost profits. It was to get rich. But it was also a way to concentrate control over us. That was intentional, and it was from the first. And we have to be honest, it wasn't only Republicans who did this. In the 1990s, it was Bill Clinton who finished the job. I mean, he had some help from people like Larry Summers, but it was under Bill Clinton that Larry Summers was allowed to finish a job started under Ronald Reagan. So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is to resist and to take control, to retake control. Last year, President Biden did something truly extraordinary with his executive order on competition. I mean, he called out a second-rate intellectual 4 years ago, a guy named Robert Bork, and he said, Robert Bork's experiment has failed. We've never seen a president do that. And Joe Biden said, we have to radically rethink everything we do when it comes to competition. And he hired people like Lena Khan and Jonathan Cantor to get the job done. It's a fantastic start, but it's not enough. And that's why these bills are so important. That's why these bills are so important. You know, none of these bills that we have seen, you know, coming through the U.S. Congress or states, U.S. state legislatures, or, you know, coming through, you know, the European Commission, none of these bills are perfect. Everyone has got some problems with it. But the thing about these bills is that in combination, these bills, you know, they actually have real power. You know, in Europe, we've seen the DSA, you know, the Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act. But here we have, you know, the American Innovation and Choice Act and, you know, the Open Apps Markets Act, you know, Senate 2992 and 2710. You know, these two bills interlock with and interact with these other bills that are coming through in a way that provides a true foundation for rebuilding democracy in the days ahead, rebuilding our economy in the days ahead. And that's the reason that Google and Facebook and Amazon are spending so much on other people's networks to knock this down, because they're afraid that they understand that this is going to have a real effect. So it's vital that we make this happen. It's really vital that we make this happen, and we can, and we will. And when we have done that, we're going to find that once we have dealt with these most immediate of threats, we're going to find that we have this amazing tool, anti-monopoly law, to not only engineer a more perfect economy, but engineer a far better society and a better world. So this is the beginning of a real future for all of us.
You've answered a lot of my questions. I think the way you have looked at sort of the history, but also the various other aspects of our economy and where we have concentration up and down in every sector. Can you put into context what it means to actually push back and go the other direction for once after 40 years, but also what that means for us next? What is next after big tech, and how can we do that?
It's like that's, you know, what you just said is really important. Like, to be able to push back after 40 years. You know, we've been backfooted for a really long time. You know, it's like Reagan came and he just whacked us, and then he whacked us again, and we just like kind of went backwards. And, you know, and then when we thought we had a friend in the White House in 1993, when Bill Clinton took power, he whacked us, and he whacked us again. He pushed us back. And at a certain point, we kind of lost the ability to move forward. We said, I'm going to be happy if we just like stop going backwards as fast as we've been going. I'm just going to dig a line and, you know, and try and stand here and not go backwards. And so the most important thing for us to realize right now is if we use these laws, we can go forwards again. We can take control of everything that stands in front of us, and we can make it work for us. And that's, you know, it sometimes seems fantastical, but the thing about anti-monopoly law, it's political economy. It's how you shape how people compete with each other in society, and it means that we are shaping the society itself.
And so tonight we're asking people to call their senators. Talk about the consequence if we don't push back, if we don't win this fight. What does that mean for this movement and for our ability to challenge corporate power going forward?
You know, we are going to push back. We are going to win. And the reason we're going to push back, the reason we're going to drive forward, the reason we're going to win and then win again is because we got no other choice. Because one of the things is that we finally realized, after having been pushed back for so many years, that our backs are against the wall. There's no place else to go, you know? But that's reason to move forward. But the real reason to move forward is because we can see a far better world in the near future that we can make starting today, after we have knocked down Google, Facebook, and Amazon, after we have knocked down Monsanto and all of the other corporations that stand in our way. It is through hope. It's hope that should and will pull us forward.
You talk about big tech, you talk about these, the other industries. Can you talk about their political power as it compares to some of these other industries that we think of as the most powerful in DC, the big oil, the big pharma? Where are we with big tech?
That's a really great question, because for many years now we said, okay, Exxon, that's the devil, right? Or Monsanto, we got the devil over there in Monsanto, and we got to deal with those two devils, But with Google and Facebook and Amazon, we see deviltry at an entirely different level. I mean, these corporations, they control the entire internet. I mean, they control communications. They control how we engage in business with one another. They stand in between us, day after day, week after week, manipulating how we engage with one another, manipulating how we feel. I mean, that's one of the things that Frances Haugen showed. When Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, she showed that Facebook, just in their algorithm, they routinely manipulate their algorithm to just make us angry. For every happy thought that's out there, they're going to push 5 to 10 angry thoughts at you. And they have, on top of that, on top of controlling this incredible apparatus, they have all that money. And they have all those people in their pockets. And they have all these large corporations that are afraid of them. Like really powerful corporations that are afraid of them. Rupert Murdoch is afraid of Google and Facebook and Amazon. When we get to a world in which Rupert Murdoch is afraid of corporations, that's a dangerous place to be, because we should all be afraid of Rupert Murdoch. So that's how much power they have. But what's happening now is this massive democratic uprising. It started in the U.S. states, with the state AGs doing all these investigations and bringing these cases against Google and Facebook. It's, the federal government's engaged in this. We have the Senate and the House with these bills. We've got every single government across Europe engaged in this. We have South Africa and India and Turkey and Brazil and Australia engaged in this fight. And that's why we're going to win, because, when you got the entire world standing against you, you're going to lose.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Barry. We really appreciate it. This was illuminating and helpful. Again, reminder, we do want you to call your senators. So we're going to put the link again in the chat. It's really important that your senators hear from you to support the Open Apps Market Act and the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. These are a mouthful, so that's S2710 and S2992. And the link is ourrev.us/breakup-tech. And so now we're going to turn to our last guest in this segment, but by no means least, Evan Greer. She's the director of Fight for the Future and is part of our coalition fighting to pass these bills. So, Evan, unlike so many other priorities that we have on the progressive side, this is something we really have a strong chance to get past this year. Talk to us about this fight and how we're going to win.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm so glad there's so many folks here to learn about this, because this really is sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity. I came up in the anarchist punk scene, and I know more about the inner workings of the legislative process than I ever wanted to. But having been on the front lines of fights like net neutrality and internet privacy and things like facial recognition for years, I can tell you that it is very rare that we are poised, as we are now, to actually get something good over the finish line. At Fight for the Future, we spend a lot of time smacking down bad legislation, things like the Earn It Act that would undermine end-to-end encryption, or other bills that would lead to widespread internet censorship. And we have to spend so much of our time fighting back against these attacks on our liberties and basic rights and basic human rights and justice that it's such a breath of fresh air to actually be within striking distance of getting something over the finish line that would actually make positive structural change. And I think that's what's really important to understand about these bills and why I personally got so fired up about them. I feel like so much of the work we do in the tech policy space is essentially harm reduction, where we're trying to convince the existing platforms that we have to be like slightly less terrible, or we're trying to, again, beat back against erosions of our rights. And so the fact that we have this opportunity right now to actually pass something that will fundamentally restructure the way that the internet economy currently works in a way that could enable a broad democratization, kind of bring us back to the original vision of the internet as a place with open source, decentralized, community-driven platforms that really serve us and our needs. And so for me, these bills, they're not going to fix everything that's wrong with big tech. They're not going to, stop all of the abuses, but they put us on a path toward a future where Facebook, Google, and Amazon don't run the world. And if we don't get ourselves on that path, the future is looking pretty grim.
Yeah, and that point that we're in this place of being able to push for something positive and almost win, right? We're here, instead of, as you say, fighting back and pushing back on the bad. It's really exciting to be part of that. So one of the things that's really interesting about this issue is that it's, in the campaign, is that it really seems to attract both members of Congress and people on the outside from a wide diversity of ideology. And so, is that correct? And what do you think of that?
Absolutely. And again, a lot of this reminds me of the battle for net neutrality, which brought together millions of people from across the political spectrum. If there's one thing that everyone can agree on, it's that we don't want large corporations to screw us over more than they already do. And as Barry was talking about, there's just so many concrete examples of how monopoly power harms ordinary people in our everyday lives. And so while I think sometimes, folks in the tech press or whatever might want to portray this as a bit of a wonky, in the weeds issue that lawyers are batting around, it actually genuinely is something that affects billions of people and that we experience every day. And so we've seen that play out, where you can look at the polls, which show that voters from across the political spectrum, from the furthest left to the furthest right, agree that they want lawmakers to crack down on these companies and their abusive business practices. You can see that in the co-sponsors of these bills, which are pretty much evenly split, Democrats and Republicans. And again, I saw some folks in the chat saying like, well, is that a warning sign? And normally I would say, it's worthy to be skeptical when there are certain types of lawmakers supporting a bill. But in this case, it's really a genuinely good bill, and one that a lot of thought has been put into. And that's why it's attracted this kind of coalition of strange bedfellows who recognize that while we may not agree on exactly how to fix other aspects of tech companies' abuses, this is one thing where we can bring together a kind of unique coalition and actually strike at the heart of these companies' harm, which is their size and scale and power that gives them this enormous oversized influence, not just over online discourse and what we say, but over our entire economy, and when it comes down to it, over what the future of our society looks like, and whether it's going to be a future built on openness and basic human rights and justice, or a future kind of built on walled gardens where corporations control almost every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, I've been in DC a long time, and I get very, very cynical. And it's always easiest to bet that Congress won't act. But I'm very optimistic and very excited, because I feel like we are in this space where people all looking in the same direction at the same time, and we're all moving together. And every argument the company seems to throw falls flat and doesn't stick, and they're throwing more and more money, which is a problem. The whole system, it's a problem. But we do. I feel personally very optimistic, and I see in the chat the cynicism, and it's totally reasonable, right? That everything in the world kind of sucks. But but this is one area where the lobbyists are failing, and I think they're going to spend $100 million on this, and so far they don't really have a friend in Congress. It's crazy.
No, that's absolutely right. And again, it is important. Like, I respect the cynicism. I wake up every day with it. It's important. We have to be critical of our political systems and how they so often fail. But then we also have to be like so stoked and seize on the moment when we actually have one of these kind of once in a lifetime opportunities to make something happen. And again, for folks that were around for the net neutrality fight, everyone said it was impossible for us to get Title II in place, and we did, and we're on track to kind of get it restored again. So we can make that change, but it does take kind of a leap of faith and recognizing when we have one of these opportunities. And I think again, what's so important to understand now is just the current state of play. So the reason that the lobbyists are throwing everything they have is that they are panicking. They actually see the writing on the wall and recognize that if these bills go to the floor, not a single member of Congress, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, wants to go on the record as a shill for Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Apple, right? That is a tough vote no matter who you are or where you sit. These are some of the most unpopular companies in the entire world, right? And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid getting to that point because they know if it hits the floor, it's going to pass overwhelmingly. So that's where we have the lobbyists working their little butts off, running, spending millions of dollars running ads targeting vulnerable Democrats, for example, and trying to get them to kind of quietly shut this down behind the scenes by convincing them that taking a vote on these bills is somehow going to be bad for them. I don't understand how any Democrat would think that shilling for big tech is going to somehow help their election chances. But this is what lobbyists and their friends are whispering in their ear. And that's why it's so important that we make noise right now. Fight for the Future just launched a new campaign today where we're actually crowdfunding for billboards targeting two of the Democrats who have effectively been standing in the way of these bills, Senator Hassan in New Hampshire and Senator Bennett in Colorado. And we're urging them to get on the right side of history, stop shilling for big tech. But this is a way we can get on their radar. It actually might surprise you, but billboards don't cost that much money, but they're also really hard to ignore. Especially when you put them up in a lawmaker's home state. So, mostly I just want people to spread the word. I think we're going to raise the money and get these billboards up. But the point is, we need to make sure that Democrats especially are hearing more from us, their constituents, the general public, than they are from the big tech lobbyists who are trying to convince them that supporting this popular legislation is going to somehow hurt them in the election. That's just ridiculous. It's absurd that they're falling for it. And so we need, Senator Schumer to act like a majority leader, not a minority leader, put this on the floor, let's get it done. And I think if it does hit the floor, it's going to pass overwhelmingly. And it'll actually be, an enormous victory, not just in terms of the impact, but a story to tell our children and our children's children about how we took on one of the most powerful industries in the history of human civilization and beat them and took their asses to the finish line. So.
So one more time, I'm going to give the chat here before I let you go, Evan. But it's rrev.us/breakup tech. You can click that link. It'll take you to a place so you can reach out to your senators wherever you are. And Evan mentioned a few there: New York, Colorado, New Hampshire, but all 50 states. Only the states, unfortunately. These senators all need to hear from you. One other thing in the chat, Evan, I think it's something you were engaged in, is this question about Apple, right? Like it's easy to be mad at Facebook, but Apple's the good one. But can you talk a little bit? I mean, you've been involved in the debate about, or the fight about the App Store monopoly. Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, actually, because this is what brought me and Fight for the Future into this fight originally. We were actually originally a little bit skeptical of this antitrust effort. Again, just because, as I mentioned before, we so often see regulation come from Washington, D.C. that sounds good on paper, says it does one thing, but does another thing, right? The Patriot Act, the Earn It Act, et cetera. And so we always sort of approach everything with a bit of a grain of salt. And it took us a minute. We were like, oh, I don't know, this, maybe not. But talking to our friends in civil society groups and really learning more about these bills helped me understand, again, that they're actually really foundational. They go beyond just kind of quibbling over what the rules should be on the tiny handful of platforms that we have, and toward kind of restructuring things in a way that really significantly could reopen the internet and bring it back to the democratized vision that we want. And on the App Store side, it's actually, again, incredibly impacting kind of my community and others like it. Fight for the Future put together a report with a China-based human rights organization called Great Fire, showing that Apple's App Store monopoly has enabled the censorship of LGBTQ-related apps in dozens of countries around the world. Basically because Apple refuses to allow people to run software on their phones that doesn't go through Apple's restricted App Store, they essentially create this perfect choke point for authoritarianism and tyranny, where governments can effectively get apps censored on billions of people's iPhone by sending an email to Apple, more or less. And that choke point shows why this closed, walled garden kind of methodology for structuring the internet is fundamentally incompatible with basic human rights. And it's also obviously impacting software developers and small businesses who are trying to come up with a business model other than surveillance capitalism, right? So if you're trying to create a tool or something that's not based on surveillance-driven advertising, and you have to give Apple 30% of your revenue from the start just to exist in the iPhone ecosystem, that's an impossible task for software developers who are trying to create better alternatives to platforms like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And so again, for us, this is not just kind of about like wonky economic policy and, you know, innovation and stuff like that, you know, which are fun buzzwords that politicians in Washington, D.C. always love to throw around. This is actually a foundational fight about whether we get to pick and choose what software we run on the devices that we own. And if we head for a future where hardware manufacturers like Microsoft or Facebook, when they're making Oculus, get to define and control what software we run on the devices that we own, that's a world with turnkey tyranny for authoritarians. That's a world with turnkey censorship and surveillance. And that's a world that's fundamentally incompatible with the type of world that I want my kid to grow up in, and I know that you all want your kids and your kids' kids to grow up in, which is a world with basic human rights and a world where they have a voice and where they can pick and choose kind of that ability to engage with technology, and in a world where technology is a force for good and empowerment rather than a force for tyranny and greed.
Thank you for that, and thank you so much for joining us, Evan. I want to thank all of our guests and partners for supporting and joining us tonight. Throughout this fight, I've been blown away at each stage. I really am optimistic, by how much farther we've gotten than I would have predicted. It feels like we're on the cusp of getting real change enacted, and I, for one, am very excited about this, to be a part of this. So thank you for letting me join this call, and I can pass it back to Amanda Nichols now to talk about how our revolution is mobilizing folks to get active in this campaign.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Really great interviews, super informative. Hope everybody is really motivated because we're dropping the link again. We just keep dropping it. Even if you think your senator can't be budged, we want to just lodge our demand. We want to make sure that everybody's heard, no matter who your senator is. Like, we want the groundswell here. So again, that link is rrev.us/breakuptech. And we have one of our phone bankers with us here tonight, another Amanda Walker, who is going to tell us about her experience on the phones. Amanda, let our folks know what it's like to make these calls. It seems pretty easy, am I right?
It really is pretty easy. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Walker, and I have been a phone banker with Our Revolution since last October. And I have been doing this new project just recently because Washington is one of the starting states that we started with for calls, because this is such a hub for big tech. We have Microsoft and we have Amazon, and they are thriving. Meanwhile, someone in Seattle, the average person can hardly afford a studio apartment. And so we are trying to get the word out to our senators. We hope it's going to have support, but we don't want to just hope. We want to actually call and take action. So the first step for me in phone banking, even though I'm used to making a lot of calls, I was sort of both caller and callee at the same time. I used the website we've been talking about, the rrev.us/breakup up tech. That'll probably appear in the chat again. And I got to this website. It has a very nice little logo of the rich Uncle Pennybags from Monopoly running off with our money, which I think is really appropriate for these tech monopolies. And you just put in your name, number, email, zip code, click the green button that says make the call, and then your phone will ring and instantly connect you to the first of the two offices. There's a little script on the website, and you can leave a message to your senators, or you can say something in your own words about why this issue is important to you. And again, you can find that link in the chat. But in the time since I've made the call myself, I've started making calls to other people in Washington to do the same. One woman I talked to today, she instantly agreed, and she said, I do stuff like this. It takes but a quick minute. And I like that phrasing, because it was like, it just takes like that to just have your voice heard by your senators on something so important. And really encourage you to do the same. We need these senators to hear emphatically from their constituents, and as many as possible, that they support this bill and how important it is. Now, once you've made that call, you may think, that was so easy. Is there anything else I can do? There is. You could join our phone bank force and make calls about big tech and other things. We have done calls like in the past few weeks. This is primary season, and it's right before midterms. I have made calls for people in North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Illinois, California, all over the place, trying to get these progressive candidates and causes advanced on the ballot. And we need all the help we can get. It's okay if you have no experience, we will train you. And it's easy and fun, and it's really rewarding, because I feel like I'm doing something to actually take action besides, I made this one call to my senators, what else can I do? Trying to just get that snowball effect, get that word out to as many people as possible. So we'd love to have you on Phone Bank Force. Someone may have dropped a link already. If you're interested in signing up for a shift or two, we would love to have you.
Very good. Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that first person perspective on making the calls. Because I mean, even myself, I think like, oh no, you get nervous right before you type in the number or whatever. This, you just put your information, it calls you, and then you can speak to someone at the office or leave a message, or you can get involved with our phone bank force. Like she said, even if you've never made these kind of calls before, once you start doing it, it gets a little addictive. You feel the impact that you're making, and you want to have that multiplier effect. So like she said, it's primary season. We're calling for candidates like Amy Villela for Congress, Brittany Ramos de Barros for Congress, Andy Levin, who's up for re-election in Michigan. So the phone bank force, it's in the chat right now. I see they dropped the link. So if you want to do more calls than just call your senators, definitely get involved there. We need that groundswell. Also this week, the January 6th investigative hearings are going to be happening starting Thursday. And, that's great. But Congress only has the power to investigate, not prosecute. And that's why our revolution has been taking action to call on secretaries of state across the country to demand that they do their job to enforce the Constitution and bar insurrectionists from the ballot. The Constitution actually prohibits anyone who's taken part in this insurrectionist activity. They're disqualified from even seeking re-election. And so we have a petition being dropped in the chat right now, where you can sign that and keep these criminal insurrectionists, out of government. They have no business serving in government, and they disqualified themselves, frankly. So we hope that you'll sign that. But also, we have some in-person events happening in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Colorado. We're going to be rallying and demonstrating our demand for state elections officials to recognize that these oath breakers are not qualified to run on the ballot. So hopefully you'll go to any of these 3 links that are being dropped right now. If you're in Pennsylvania, Arizona, or Colorado, click on those and RSVP to join us in person. So that's just some of the stuff we've got going on here at Our Revolution. I hope that you guys are feeling motivated and that you'll sign up to become an official member with us tonight. We need everybody working, rowing together in the same direction. Like our guests were speaking about tonight, this is how we make change. We can change politics, we can change lives, but we got to be in this together. So if you're in Zoom, click the link to sign up to be a member. If you're on the phones, press *3 and an operator will help you sign up. That's ourrev.us/2022 member. Thank you guys all for joining us tonight. We're ending a little early, but I think we had a great show. And with that, let me wrap things up with our chant. So everybody unmute. When we organize,
We win.
when we organize,
We win.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Woo.